help me greet please from Australia, John Graham, and from Calgary, Alberta, Lorri Yasenik. A nice hand of applause, please.
Thank you. We just pulled out the recommendations from last Symposium in 2014. Number 1, good reasons to develop a flexible approach for involving children during mediation process. Number 2, there are a number of different ways to include children in the mediation process. Seen alone, alone with parents, alone with mediators, co-mediation, and children actually involved as well. Number 3, mediators should receive a specific training regarding the inclusion of children. And also that Canadian-based research is necessary to determine some of the best practices in the area. And since meeting with John, I said we should write something, and he said, yes, yes, yes. And you know how it is at one of these things, somebody goes away with your email, and that's the end of it. But John showed up again on email, and we ended up working for 1 full year together on Skype the year after. And then thereafter, some other things occurred, and we have a little summary of that. And we think we have tried very, very hard, and we worked really a long time. 4 years we have worked very hard at this topic on all those areas of recommendation.
Just to give you a context around what's happening in Australia. Australia's had family mediation effectively since 1992. The government started funding family mediation back then. In 1996, we had a change to our Family Law Act that mandated pre-mediation appointments. And so in family mediation, we cannot start a mediation process without first meeting with the clients in a pre-mediation. And that was quite a departure from what was happening internationally. It was a decision to say that we didn't need to worry about the bias of the mediator, that it wouldn't affect neutrality, but that the identification, particularly of family violence issues, was very, very important. In 2006, the biggest change to our Family Law Act occurred with the creation of mandated family dispute resolution. It was done really because lawyers were not sending clients to mediation, and the legislature said this is stupid. We've actually got to do something about it, and so they used the law as a social change agent. And so there's 65 centres across Australia, and somewhere around about 95,000 clients go through those 65 centres each year. And so one of the changes that happened in our family relationship centres was that initially lawyers were banned from attending family relationship centres unless they were clients. So they could go if they were a client, but other than that, they weren't allowed in. And in 2009, that law was changed to allow for legally assisted family dispute resolution within those 65 centres. And that has dramatically increased the safety of clients. The lawyers that are used are community-based lawyers, so they're not private practitioners, and they come in with the idea of assisting clients to reach agreements. So we just wanted to give you a slide of what our history has been, what has happened since 2014.
It took about 3-4 years to study the question, what are people doing and how are they doing it when they're including children in legal matters? We know that it's important to include them. We know that people are including them, but I really wanted to know what my colleagues were doing and what other practitioners were doing. But what happened with this inquiry was that lots of people were doing lots of different kinds of things. They were doing little bits of things that I thought all over the place were probably quite good, but nothing structured, nothing standard. About the best you can get is someone has a protocol for an interview. That's about the best you can get. And how did they use the interview, and how did they choose the interview questions, and what their bias orientation was a little bit disappointing, I guess, in terms of how we think about children, how we need to include children, and how we need to think about children as human beings and people who are a party to a process, but they have a lot of things to say that have nothing to do with what the ultimate questions are in the courtroom, and their parents' own interpretations and thoughts about these things. So we took, in 14, the idea that, okay, there's nothing structured, but there's some things people are doing. Let's pull the things together. Let's look at those important factors and also look at other theories of working and being with children. And because I come from a child psychotherapy and play therapy background, and I train in that area, I thought, okay, we need to get beyond just the language of questioning children. You're comfortable with it, and I'm happy for that, but they're not always comfortable with that. And in fact, there's all kinds of ways to make use of questions for children that put them in a place where they can say as much as they would like to say about lots of things that have nothing to do with what the drive is from the systems.
And when we started talking about this work back in 2014, we actually started with a bit of an argument, you'd have to say.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I said, oh, good, an Australian. And I thought, in Australia, they must be doing lots of child-inclusive work because of Jen McIntosh's work and other people in Australia. And I thought, wow, they must be doing this all the time.
Yeah. And being the only Australian in the room, I had a pretty good chance of getting that job. So Lorri chose me, and I just said there's no one else in Australia who could really help you, and so she's never bothered to look to see if there's anyone else. But, so it's been pretty lucky for me.
Yeah, so on we went really from there, and we decided in 15 and in 16 to travel around different locations in different jurisdictions to find out what are other people doing in other countries to include children, and what kind of training are they looking for, and what kinds of things are they talking about, and so on. And so we have at least 7 countries that we could identify that we did that in. And in 16, we wrote the article called the Child-Centered Continuum Model for Inclusion of Children, and looking at the levels of parent readiness and parent availability to hear their children's thoughts and ideas.
And one of the reasons we wrote that article is exactly what the theme of this particular symposium is about, and that is that by and large, the experience of Australia has been that we will only use child-inclusive practice on the nice cases, the cases where the parents genuinely are interested in hearing what their children are saying, and no one was talking to the children in high conflict cases. It was largely done. It has largely occurred out of a desire to be protective of the child and to say we shouldn't make things worse for the child. But in doing that, no one bothers talking to the children who are probably the most vulnerable people in all of our family law cases. Lorri and I stepped back from that and had quite an argument about that. Lorri said we should be able to talk to all children, and we need to have a model that is robust enough to do it. And I was saying, well, that's just impossible. You can't do that. Australia doesn't do that, so no one's allowed to do that. And so we started to work together around this thing called the Child-Centered Continuum Model that identifies that there are different levels of readiness for parents to hear the voice of their child according to the level of, particularly according to things like high conflict.
And the other thought is that it's not so much that people don't think children should be involved even in the higher conflict realm, but I think that the issue is that people don't know what to do with the children. They don't know how to do it safely, appropriately. They don't have enough structure. And so what we ended up doing is creating a lot of structure for you and leaving the structure open, like almost no structure for the child. So the design for these approaches are really child therapy, theoretically child-led kinds of approaches. And so in 17, we did some other work around this. We ended up doing a manual and a book, and we ended up doing what I was almost having a nervous breakdown finishing around Christmas in 17, because everybody that we train or people who we go to speak to, yes, you took a child development course. I'm sure you took a workshop sometime. And I'm pretty sure that it's dusty, at best, probably, in your undergraduate years somewhere. But people are saying, well, what about child development, and how can we do this so that we have a tool online all the time or somewhere that we can make use of it? So I ended up spending a lot of time, and this was both for my clinical practice, as well as the practice of working with people who are in the alternative dispute resolution community. I looked at lots of different resources and books and things and put this thing together in one spot so that people could take a look at it, and it's being added to as we go. So it's an online child development and practice guide that is in your handout, and it comes with a lot of text. So this book, for instance, is the text of what that wheel is actually.
And the beauty of that, the child development, the wheel of child development is what it's called, is that it's a practical guide. It's saying, what do I need to know right now for the child that I'm about to meet, rather than saying, okay, here's Child Development 101. We're going to start with the theorists, and we're going to start with Erickson and all those people, and not really getting to apply it. This is all about application and how do I make sense of the child in front of me. Are they achieving normative milestones in terms of their cognitive development, their social development, their moral development, their physical development?
Essentially, we went on and we've trained about 250 people now, I think, around that in this approach that we're going to talk to you a little bit about. And then in 2018, we were on a committee, pulled together a committee of people, and there was lawyers, judges, private practitioners, and the public mediation, our government mediation program represented, and developed guidelines for child-inclusive practice for mediators, as well as for what we call the child consultant role, which is not a role that's known a lot in Canada. It is known in Australia. It isn't a voice of the child report people. It isn't people who are doing forensic work. It isn't people who are doing clinical work. It's people that are trained to actually speak to a child in a short-term manner, like a time-limited manner, and that they bring back information either to the third party, or they actually are that person that speaks to the child, like if you're the mediator and you're going to also do that speaking to the child. First time, I think, in all of Canada. I don't know another province in Canada that has child-inclusive mediation guidelines.
And we're pretty sure it would be amongst the earliest in the world. Australia has not written its guidelines. So we don't have guidelines for who can be a child consultant, who can practice child-inclusive mediation, who can meet with a child. We haven't done that. We know that the UK has recently come out with some guidelines around child-inclusive mediation, and as far as we can see, Alberta would be one of the first other places in the world to do it. It's a very, very exciting outcome that came out of us starting to I guess, rattle some cans in Alberta. Do you say that, rattling cans?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Okay. So we wanted to start with the Child-Centered Continuum Model. What is it? People may or may not have read that article in the Family Court Review, but it's really a way to conceptualize a case with children included in the process somehow. Standardly, we look across the world, that children are really not involved. Parents come in, and they usually are the representatives of their children's voices, typically. In the Child-Centered Continuum Model, we were thinking, well, okay, parents come into the process. Yes, their relationship and history comes into the room. Yes, their individual issues come into the room, but then also their children are also in the room, and not like either actually or metaphorically. So they're brought in at least by a third party, or they're brought in actually directly.
At the centre of the approach is a child meeting, and how that meeting occurs is part of a 4-day training course that Lorri and I have developed, and it's now been run multiple times in Australia, and we've taught trainees in Canada and in the USA as well. But one ring out, you'll see the words the Child and Youth Concerns Scale. And one of the differences about this approach, the Child-Centered Continuum Model, is that we want to use some tools to be able to assist us to be able to either assess the readiness of a parent to hear or a child to speak, or a scale that says, how do we assemble all the information that the child gives us in a way that can both give feedback to parents which is positive about the things that are going really well post-separation, and the concerns. Much of the child inclusive practice in Australia has been developed around the impact of conflict on children. And I've sat with practitioner after practitioner where parents are just brought into a feedback session where the child consultant just says your conflict is damaging your child, and stop it. You've just got to stop it. Just stop it, stop it, stop it. And so it's almost like this punishment session that parents have to steel themselves for to hear what they're doing wrong and how badly they're damaging their children. And what we've said is actually, what about identifying the resiliencies? What about identifying the strengths? And the Child and Youth Concern Scale is a way of being able to collate all of the information that a child gives us, including the positives, the importance of grandparents, as Ricardo was saying, the importance of extended family, of maintaining the children might be talking lovingly about spending time with the grandparents. And we can say that to parents. Clearly, the extended family is being very useful. We've identified 4 different levels of parents, and that's determined by the use of a scale called the Parent Readiness Scale. Some parents we would call level 1 parents, the people that may be participating in the alienating activities that we heard about over the other days, the people whose conflict is super high and who have very little capacity, probably wrong word, readiness to hear their child's voice. Difference between readiness and capacity is readiness does not lock people in forever. We're not saying this person has the readiness of a gnat and will never change. Okay? We're saying this person right now is not able to very effectively hear the voice of their child. And it could be that the readiness has kind of gone down because my ex has just repartnered. Or it could be that we're caught up in doing the financial settlement and it's going very badly and I feel like I'm getting shafted. It could be that I'm just really, really upset because I got dumped by my partner and I still haven't recovered from that. It could be that I've been the target of violence or the user of violence. All of those reasons might contribute to someone being at the lowest level of the parent readiness scale. That level 4, if we just jump to the other end, it's saying that at level 4, these parents have a readiness to be able to say, our relationship, our couple relationship has ended, and we are able to sit together in the best interests of our children, and we genuinely want to engage with our children, even by bringing the children into the mediation room for a part of the process, not for the whole process, to hear what their concerns are. We're distinguishing concerns from decision making. We're not asking the children to make decisions for their parents. We're saying that the parents' decisions can be informed by the voice of the child. That's simply what we're saying. And so the lowest level we've called managed child focus, and the kind of people in that category, high conflict, including reactive hatred. There's no differentiation from the child. So what the child wants is what I want is what the child wants. What the child is saying is what I'm saying. The child couldn't possibly want to spend time with mum or dad because mum or dad are awful or evil, all those kind of things. Right through to direct child participation, moderate to low conflict, sensitive and warm parenting, ability to differentiate from the child, and ability to contain conflict in front of the child. Now, when we first wrote this, we thought, oh, okay, people will just go on this lovely kind of journey from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. And it was kind of nice and orderly, and it would work perfectly as long as our clients didn't come into the room. Then, when they did come in the room, we then discovered that people can jump from 1 to 4, 4 to 1, 2 to 3, 3 to 2. They can go all over the shop. They'll do whatever they want. Their movement their readiness will change. I think you say on a dime. Do you say that in Canada? Do you say that in Canada as well? Do you have dimes? Oh, you have dimes too. Okay, it can change on a dime. We say on a 20-cent piece. So, so we always need to be looking for the change in readiness across the life of a file.
One of the things that I think underpins the thinking for us is that, or many of the things, I guess on this slide, are that the children have lots of things to say, and really, really young children have lots of things to say, and that their input really needs to just be valued unto itself. And so what we're teaching in our ways of working with children, if you're going to include them in your practice, is to be doing a very non-evaluative approach. Non-evaluative means it takes you out of that clinical role of saying, this means that means this, we're interpreting that. What they say is what they say. What you get is what you get. We think that the child's views are very different than the ways in which their parents present their views. Some of them are similar, but mostly the child will give you all kinds of things that are different. And the best source of their views are from them. In Ontario now, the new act, the Child Protection Act, now really is much more keyed into the concept that there is no best interest of the child without the child's voice involved in it. I think if we're going to be doing this well, we do need training to do it, and I think if we're going to do it well, we need to really hear what the child has to say, even if it isn't exactly what we thought or wanted them to say. So it's multi-layered, this idea. Meaningful inclusion involves a lot of different things. And one of the things that it involves is that we have to have cooperative adults. So the skill and awareness really needs us to figure out what are we doing, and what are we doing besides the typical strategic interview. And we're going to be talking about not doing the interview the way in which the traditional people might want to do it. So there's tensions between best interest, obviously, and child's input. And the one thing that everything points to, really, literature-wise, is that we don't want to walk down the road of tokenism, so that you've got a one-time meeting with a child and then off you go. Are you kidding me? If I interviewed you once and never came back to you, ever, thanks for sharing. I'm now going to tell whoever and whoever and whoever, and I'm going to write it in a report, and I'm never even going to read you the report. I'm not even going to go over that with you. Or I'm going to, and we're not advocating reports in this process, by the way, but and never go back. And so there's a lot of thinking that has to go into children's rights, a lot. We have been working with a woman called Laura Lundy in Ireland. And Laura's well known for this diagram because it talks about the children's space, and she's put these little circles and boxes to talk about what our most important things are that we have to think about when we're working with including children. Article 2, non-discrimination, is the box out to the left. Article 3, best interests. Article 13 to the far right is the right to information. Article 5, the right to guidance from adults. Because Article 5 actually talks in detail about the right to be scaffolded in the process, and have little activities or little ways in which children can bring more to the table. In the center, she's got space and voice, and the right to express a view crosses over that. But what are our spaces looking like? What ways are we getting voice? Influence and audience. How does the voice influence anyone, anywhere, and in what ways? And who is the audience that hears the voice? And then how do you give these pieces of information due weight? And due weight is a really important issue.
And so as we started to design our training program, and at the pilot of the work both in Sydney and Calgary, what we identified was that at the top, the space and voice creates the space for a child to say, I just need to tell you this. And it's period, full stop. I just want you to know this. It's not about getting information for someone else. It's not the shopping list of, here are the questions that we want answered from the child. This is about the child's right to voice in the space that is appropriate, their voice about what's happening in their world, period. The next part at the bottom of the box, the influence and audience, is about what do we do with that information? How do we negotiate with that child to bring what they would like brought back to the other audience, namely their parents?
We're looking at how are we bringing that back, and in what ways are we bringing that back to parents that have very, very low readiness to hear their child. If we stay in the family law sector only, we end up becoming quite stovepiped and not so global in terms of what are other people doing to gain voice of child, for instance, in school environments and other environments. The UNCRC is looking at all kinds of child inclusion all across the world. UNICEF looks at that. So we're looking into those kinds of ways in which children are included, and how do we actually even include children to help us understand when we're doing studies, for instance, how they would like to be asked questions, or how would they like to be included, and in what ways would they like to be included.
What we wanted to design is a tool that a mediator could use, whether they come from a legal background, so they're a lawyer mediator, or whether they are a mental health mediator. A lot of the child-inclusive practice models require that the person meeting with the child come from a psychology or a social work background. What we developed was a protocol which is quite prescriptive in exactly what you say, exactly what you do, so that we, as Lorri said, so we kind of restrict what the practitioner is doing, so the child has maximum space to give us whatever feedback they would like.
When you get to the activities for the child's going to be doing a lot of projective kind of work, meaning that they're going to make use of pictures or other kinds of materials that we supply in the training, and they'll do it and tell you what they want to about them. And surprisingly, you learn an awful lot about what they think and what they feel. The Child-Centered Continuum Model is supported by 3 tools. The parent readiness, the youth and child readiness, or child and youth readiness, and the child and youth concerns scale. When I designed this, we thought, okay, this is not a state, it's a trait, or sorry, not a trait, it's a state. It's a temporary position that parents are in, and they move all over the place, which John already mentioned. So change is definitely possible, because the scale is intended for practitioners. It is not intended to give to a parent. You do not fill it out and give it to them. You're just using it as a practitioner tool, period. I designed it so that it's got 9 scales, and there are 3 groupings. Grouping 1, individual abilities, parent-child relationship, and some attachment matters. Parent-parent relationships related to disengagement and their relationship in general, in terms of their value of the relationship that they feel towards the other and related to the children. In the work that we've done now, is the scale is outlined, every item, what does it mean, where did it come from, why is it there, and then some examples if you were to rate it, use these ratings. What kinds of items might you hear to say that the person is either high or low on that particular scale. So parent differentiation from child, parent insight. You heard Bill say that, you know, that these parents are the really high dysregulated style person has fairly low insight. Parent sensitivities can often be quite low with a group that is in the higher conflict realm. Level of disengagement, and that's a level of disengagement from the other party, not the child. Parent ability to value the role of the other parent. Problem-solving ability of the parent. The parent's ability to self-regulate. Parent ability to take a neutral stance, read the other parent, and the ability to place the child's needs over their own needs, the parent need.
In the scale, people get a score for each of the 9 items. So as a supervisor, what I'm asking the supervisee to do is to identify where the lowest and the highest area of parent readiness is. And the low areas are where where that particular parent is likely to get most triggered. So we can predict where, what kind of topics and what kind of comments the other party might make that are absolutely going to inflame things. And so we can see things coming, we can be more predictive of that.
The child and youth readiness scale was also 9 items, developed to also not give out to anybody, but for you as a practitioner. If you're going to be interviewing, or in our way of talking, we don't do interviews, we do meetings with children. We're looking at very particular items for children's availability and ability to be more present, and even giving more of a permission for their thoughts or ideas to come forward. So some children's verbal ability and willingness to directly express themselves, so in language. Now, we're not requiring them all to speak in like answering direct kinds of interview processes, but in the way in which we deliver the activity, of course, there's some little inquiry around what they've done. So some children are unwilling to say anything about anything. Child development. So we're looking at very particular child development items. And of course, on the scale, all these are delineated so that you can look and see where does the child fall. What's the child's level of defensiveness? The differentiation from the parent positions. Is the child able to do that? What's the child's role in the family? Some children are playing very, very particular roles in family. They're caretakers. They're children who are making decisions. They are parentified, etc. What's the child's level of distress when you're at the time of meeting? What's the child's temperament? And we talk a little bit about that as well. And people are trained in looking at the temperament. They're doing that in their pre-meeting with the parents anyway. What's the child's level of understanding of the process? And then what's the child's level of the external support in their system? The Child and Youth Concern Scale, we just wanted to say that that's just a tool that we drop material into from the activities that we do the training on. So the people learn how to do 6 activities in this program. They learn how to do them with a protocol, very, very, very particular protocol. It's for any of you that are in the clinical realm in this room. You know that if you did a standardized measure or test, you have to deliver it the same way every time. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not valid. So all of them tend and will and do, now that we've ran this enough times, fit under these areas, these physical space, emotional space, psychological, time, understanding of parent separation, family relationships, peer supports, community connections, and where it does not fit under those, which is rare, under other.
I'm sitting with a parent, I'm bringing feedback to them, and the child might have said, I really like my birthdays at mum's house. That might be something that we're going to feedback on. And we will ask a question, what do you like about those birthdays? And the child might say, well, I really like it that mum makes cakes. What kind of cakes does she make? She makes strawberry cream cake. Okay, thank you. I might just write that down. Then when I'm coming back to giving feedback to the parents, what I'm going to say is, one of the things I found out, or that she told me I could tell you, is that she really likes the way that birthdays happen at mum's house. And mum is going to feel a little bit happy that she heard that. But when she hears it's about the homemade cake that I found out had strawberries and cream, she knows that the child and I have really engaged. It's not just about, okay, I got these answers to these questions. It's something where the parent feels, okay, that guy really did listen to my child. It was part of the feedback in giving the cream cake feedback was to earn the permission to be able to say, now we've got to have some tough conversations. That's a picture of my mediation room. So both Lorri and I have a very similar kind of layout. So I will do family mediations with parents in a room where there's shelves, there's toys, there's dollhouses. It looks and feels like this is a child-friendly environment. And that in itself has had a marked difference on my clients. They automatically feel like there is this unconscious awareness that we're in a child's space.
So we want to just come near to the end on thinking about meeting versus interviewing children. And there's a philosophical and practical difference in doing this. Interviews do hold, without a doubt, that a predetermined direction, a line of questioning. And you have to choose where you start. You have to choose what questions you're going to ask. You're going to have to, and often, even with your open-ended questions, you're still having to go down a very particular path. And it does only rely on words and language. And this is a big problem. Children come in and do all kinds of things that you don't expect them to do when you have a few things in your space. And by the way, you don't have to have a playroom, and no, you wouldn't become a play therapist by doing these things.
Just to finish off, in 2014, there was a recommendation out of this symposium that there are good reasons to develop flexible approaches for involving children during family law processes. There was a recommendation there are a number of different ways to involve children in mediation. There was a recommendation that mediators should receive specific training regarding this process. And the last one, that Canadian-based research is necessary. Lorri and I, in coming back in 2018, can tick every one of those boxes. We've just started a research project with Deakin University in Victoria, Australia, and we'll be evaluating this approach. And so all 4 of those things coming out of the last symposium, you can put a tick against.